Huzzah! Finally! A video on Jaeger LeCoultre. Better click like, darlings. Toodle pip. What makes this JLC Reverso so classy compared to, let's say, my Rolex Day-Date at around the same value? Why does a comic book hero and the sophisticates tend to go for one and the world's villains, men of power and rebels for the other? Let's find out. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. Today's story starts here with this tree. Also, a cow and a rock. We know a tree is a tree from its bark, its branches. Ditto for our friend the cow, identifiable by hooves, horns, and that imbecilic stare, as if it was a member of the Kardashian family. We know a rock is a rock because of its texture and color. We sit on transformed trees. We read them in the form of books, or at least we should. We carry our EDC in products made of cowskin. We drink White Russian cocktails with cream and eat beef in sugo di carne with pasta. Roofs, walls, and kitchen tabletops were once piles of rock. But what do all these objects have in common?
The right angle, not the wrong angle, not the left or sinister angle, but the right angle.
The right angle and the geometry that forms it is everywhere in man's creations, according to Jonathan Meades, the physical embodiment of correctitude. And nowhere is this more evident than in the symmetry of Art Deco. In its age of glory, Art Deco was the culmination of the exponential industrialization of the previous 19th century, reaching its pre-World War II peak in the interwar period at the beginning of the 20th century. Deco is a style of visual arts, architecture and product design that spawns monuments that are bold, self-celebratory, grandiose, almost always laden with symmetrical or congruent orthogonal shapes, strong contrasting colors and patterns that underlines its oppressive obsession with order and luxury, a proclamation of victory in the applied sciences and the paramountcy of technology, but above all, mankind's mastery of them, over the chaotic disorder, randomness, and decidedly non-rectilineal Mother Nature. It was an age that dreamt beyond its means and sought to reach for the stars in absurdist Flash Gordon or Tintin rockets, as if to suggest that we were just a few years from living on Mars, and not centuries. Art Deco was obsessed with technology, but also motion. The message was always, if mankind isn't moving forward, it isn't succeeding. So it was deeply aspirational. So in the red corner we have my yellow gold Day-Date with the linen dial. This is the 18238. And then of course in the blue corner we have the Reverso Duoface calendar, lent in by Shreve, Crump Low, the oldest watch store in the United States of America and a very prestigious authorized dealer for JLC. Art Deco clings, in varying degrees, to the myths and emblems of the past, while stripping away any excess fat or over-embellishment found in the Baroque or Neoclassical it intended to replace. This is an instance of pragmatism suppressing ideology, a demonstration of man's dominance over the spiritual clericalism and organic forms found in the flowery friendliness in Deco's predecessor, Art Nouveau. Deco obliterated Nouveau with a stylistic confidence as if it was some kind of technophiliac march on Rome. It's no wonder that elements of Deco would permeate into Italy's modernist and futurist movements of the fascist era from 1922 to 1943. Unfortunately, futurism would be forever associated with the regime due to calendrical chants and the political leanings of its founders.
The warmongering we associate with futurism has to do with this very nationalistic desire to make the country whole again. Marinetti and Mussolini know each other. They were part of the same groups that were proto-fascist.
As you can see, I like to collect various Art Deco bits and bobs, and Art Deco was spared such a cancel-worthy fate, thankfully. Today, the JLC, first introduced in 1931, is unequivocally the most Art Deco watch of all time. I put it on, I instantly want to board the Queen Mary and dress a little smarter. But the Reverso's main feature, that gives it its name, has something extra special here. Beyond the mechanical wizardry of the modern proprietary complications, it now shows off with those Fibonacci-dictated dimensions. Deco was almost always an over-engineered reality. The two manual wind watches in one of this particular ambidextrous Reverso is perhaps the best modern manifestation of this. The genius of this brand earned it the title of the watchmaker's watchmaker by doing all the heavy lifting for the other haughty-taughty fancy pants brands, Piaget, Vacheron Constantin, and 2 out of the 3 APs I've owned over the years had movements based on those by JLC. These are just a few examples of brands. But being the very first YouTube channel to tour their factory back in 2017, it was quite evident just how much more capable this brand was compared to everyone else I had yet seen. Born from a pre-sapphire glass age to protect against the hard knocks of polo playing, maybe the sport most evocative of colonizers and the old money it generated. Regardless of toffs playing ball games on horses in countries they had no business being in, it did associate the watch with the Bertie Woosters and Hugo Mountbattens of this world, and still does. Second World War essentially saw the end of Art Deco as the hottest style. It didn't seem so fitting in wartime austerity, that glamour, that luxury, that splendor. The inherent megalomania of Italy's modernist movement and Germany's neoclassical aesthetic of Albert Speer was obsessed with self-aggrandizement, the remaking and reorganization of man into totalitarian subordination, the product of regimes that were led by the bellicosity of men who wanted to be gods and never got past the lower slopes of Olympus. Both regimes would see the end of Art Deco on the main continent of Europe. Meanwhile, Batman comics subverted Art Deco to represent the exact opposite of its original meaning. Gotham City was a crime-ridden, highly corrupt dystopia, and those with money were most often Gatsbyan in their decadence, or just obscenely criminal in nature. Its skyscrapers, once temples of hope, now casting endless dark shadows of despair. A new Deco, nightmare Deco if you will. Notice how there are seldom sunny days in nearly all cinematic adaptations of this franchise. Our vengeful and unlikely hero Batman, born of night, now the last and only chance of any progression.
Экипаж одевает защитные очки. Точно по расчету сработала парашютная система. Бомба приближается к точке взрыва. Высота 4000 метров. Осталось 3 секунды. 2, 1, 0.
The dreamlike exaggerations of the shiny jet-powered age was about to explode into the imagination of every impressionable mind, culminating in moon missions, pop art, and white picket-fenced suburban American baby-booming beauty that temporarily masked the gross inequalities that lay beneath.
Master of movie horror exterminates you with Matt.
The story of Matt is based on scientific fact, on theories that have appeared in national magazines.
The world that did escape wars and organized extermination lapped up the vividly colored Campbell's soup tins of mass consumerism with a ravenous addiction for all things new and bright that has persisted to this day.
Kind of busy.
I'm sorry to bother you, sir. I have some rather distressing news about Master Dick.
Makes you wonder, was there also another motivation for Bruce Wayne covering his face as Batman? Was he also embarrassed of his trust fund origins? Well, he wasn't self-made, certainly, and if he was, he probably would be more inclined to the Rolex Day-Date.
Missile sites is now in preparation on the island of Cuba.
The country is on red alert.
And what a perfect time to open a new horror movie.
The Day-Date was a product of this atomic MCM age of design, despite the waterproof oyster case being a product of the 1920s. The 1950s and 60s saw the birth of madmen-designed manipulative advertising, the curves of Cadillac wings, the flash of the fluted bezel, the latter two the choice, of course, of the presidents who rode these caddies and wore the watch. Instruments would become status symbols to demonstrate technological and DuckTales amounts of money, but essentially a superiority over everyone and everything, with only a giant Soviet bear left standing, yet to defeat. Mid-century modern was the time of Le Corbusier, Max Bill, Eames, Van der Rohe, Noguchi, Alvo Alto, Frank Lloyd Wright, Lasden, and so on, just to name a few. But let's not forget the googie kitsch of the space-age Jetsons style that would blossom during these decades. Perfectly demonstrated by my lava lamp. The US of A, begetter of the big, pioneer of the new, Big Mac, Big Apple, Big Tech, Big Business, Big Bucks, Big Espresso.
Excuse me, let me tell you something. When America opened the floodgates and let all us Italians in, what do you think they were doing it for? Because they were trying to save us from poverty? No, they did it because they needed us. They needed us to build their cities and dig their subways and to make them richer. The Carnegies and the Rockefellers, they needed worker bees, and there we were. And some of us wanted a piece of the action.
The fictional mob boss Tony Soprano was a child of the 1950s, so during the 80s would have been on his way up, coinciding with the rise of the yuppie and the narco-terrorist. And we also saw a resurgence in interest for both of today's watches as a result. The Day-Date became shorthand for its Get Carter connotations, first created by captains of industry, those who wanted to emulate them, and the ever-shrewd Rolex marketing teams that capitalized on this narrative since it was first introduced in 1956. Is it any wonder that John Carpenter chose it as the watch of choice for the extraterrestrial antagonists of his cult capolavoro, They Live, in 1988? Not only was this film that I have parodied several times social commentary on the dangers of unrestrained capitalism.
You see, I take these glasses off, she looks like a regular person, doesn't she, huh? Put them back on, formaldehyde face, that's what we got.
That's enough out of you.
But the watch itself as a form of communication was an analogy for status signaling between those in the know, or you could say, those trying to take over the world. As if to say, if you're wearing one of these, you're one of us. Having grown up in New York City and in Italy and the UK, a lot of my colleagues and friends had Day-Dates, and I'm not immune to its charms. I guess it rubbed off on me. Also, it's a rejection of what I'm expected to wear, which is much more, Reverso territory. But let's not forget that despite its precious metal, It's a very versatile watch. It's 100 meters water resistance thanks to that oyster case compared to the dress watch 30 meters of the Reverso. Despite being so dramatically different, they both have their roots in sports watches. Just amazing to think. 1980s yuppie also had a taste for Art Deco again. It's no coincidence that we saw it in such abundance throughout the 1989 Tim Burton adaptation of Batman. Mixed in with the German expressionist aesthetic was the modern tech of the time. While anachronistic, it worked. Unlike the Apple Watch, which is all too often worn with suits today, making people look like some kind of clueless Philistine. The newly moneyed would try and imitate the trappings of the old world, to project status and success. Or, as we say in Italian, flexando, in the anglicised Italian New Age slang. The Day-Date had become more desired than ever, encapsulating and communicating that pull yourself up by the bootstraps and I made it messaging.
This town needs an enema.
You will only keep this job if you close. So when you look them in the eye, you have to believe that we are better.
Old money didn't have to prove anything. They already had generational wealth. That is, of course, if they didn't lose it with a Hellfire Club lifestyle. Was it very clever product placement or genius watch casting in the Nolan trilogy? Maybe it was a disguise to fit in with the Gatsby crowd, or perhaps it was emblematic of the duality in his own split personalities. Either way, it worked. The Reverso denotes refinement. The wearer most likely can tell the difference between a Canaletto and a Piranesi, a Cézanne from a Matisse, while a Rolex owner is more likely to hear these names and try and book a reservation for brunch. Refinement is the key to old money. Why do you think our very own resident aristo turned Hollywood star Hugo Mountbatten is so obsessed with trying to steal my Cartier Santos? Old money is naturally frugal, as they are accustomed to taking whatever they want without paying. With most of their accumulation of wealth being done generations or hundreds of years before by those under them, the toffs at the top were left to the pursuits and pastimes expected of them. If it wasn't equestrianism, it was wine tasting in the Loire Valley, or phenology in their capability brown designed landscapes, or touring the Uffizi to see which of the old masters they could plunder, and so on. Old money is not concerned with signalling anything but refinement. Ultimately, refinement is about being cultured, having good taste, manners, being civil, a more polished version of yourself, and as a result, it's often subtle and internal. This explains why you see less designer branding in their preppy, understated apparel, if any branding at all. It complements their predilection for traditional, dainty dress watches over the sporty uncouthness of a Richard Mille, the garish and blingy, or the oversized and tooltastic. These habits were formed over centuries of practice, of nature and nurture. So there you have it. History, horology, pop culture, sociology, class, engineering, so much, all rolled up into and so much more, into the dichotomy of two watches. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Also, don't forget to like this video, especially if you want to see more free, independent content like this. But most importantly, am I going to consider a Reverso for myself? Well, I've scratched the square watch itch with my Santos and I'm quite happy, although obviously I'm never going to rule out other possibilities from JLC, so stay tuned. Oh, and I think I forgot to do a wristwatch check. Squale 1521 on the rubber strap. This is the waffle from the blue one, the dark navy blue one from Riscani Watch Club. Anyway, I'll catch you in the next one. Onwards and upwards. Thank you for watching. Ciao.